30 years ago, I did my first TV ad. Little did I know that I would get the lifelong tag of being a child actor, which is pretty hilarious to me as a fully grown adult. A few years and 50 ads later, I was cast in my first feature film, Avai Shanmugi, the hilarious adaptation of Mrs. Doubtfire, where I play the bratty Bharati. I'd like to take a moment to ruin it for the fans. I was nothing like that naughty child I portrayed on screen. I was more the quiet kid, mugging lines in a language I didn't speak, learning expressions to go with these lines, and of course, studying for school. Totally not glamorous, I know. Post this, I went on to do more ads, guest roles in 3 movies and 3 before eventually quitting the industry when I was around 12. I wanted to start off with my background in acting because it taught me grit and primed me for being an environmental entrepreneur, or as I half jokingly say, a glorified kupakari. Now, quitting the industry took many people by surprise, but it was the most natural progression for my life and my career. In short, it was a great experience for a decade. Truly happiest away from the spotlight where I get to be myself. Before I get into what I do, let's shift the focus and talk about us, the consumer, the most important role that we play in a capitalist economy. I think by now we all know that we are reduced to target groups so people can sell more things to us efficiently. We buy these things, and often because we don't need them, sooner rather than later we have mountains of waste. Now let's do something absolutely crazy and not talk about plastics, the perceived bad boy of all waste pollution. There's other kinds of dry waste that doesn't stand out as plastic, but is still discarded every second mindlessly all over the world. Being made of plastic isn't the only thing that makes waste problematic. I know the more we learn, it can all seem overwhelming and impossible to change. So the best that we can do is focus on changing oneself, learning and unlearning as the opportunity presents. All we can hope for is that this trickles over to our immediate environment. Now, once this happens, we seek out more of our kind in our communities. We go for plog runs, go for beach cleanups, zero waste meetups, but somehow it doesn't feel enough. This is where you feel like you've hit a roadblock. It's happened to me and many others who've entered this world. If you've directly interacted with the waste, which is generated in mind-boggling quantities, your attention now turns to the product and the producers who profit from them. Let's forget all the air, water, soil pollution that occurs before the product reaches us and ask some simple questions. Now, why aren't these corporate giants with larger-than-life budgets taking any responsibility after the consumer uses the product? Why isn't the product telling us how to discard it responsibly? Who holds these producers accountable? I was beyond ecstatic to know that we do have something to keep this growing beast in check. Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR, is that knight in shining armor. It was introduced to India in 2012 to handle electronic waste, and in 2016 it included plastics too. Let's take a moment to understand a bit more about the infrastructure that most urban areas have. In India, the processes that were set up in the last 30 years since globalization were not ready to cope with the various kinds of waste being generated at alarming rates. Now, informal waste pickers were able to create a market where they collected and sold some of this frequently generated waste to processors or recyclers who needed these raw materials to efficiently run their centers. Now, this is what I refer to as high-value waste. Valued enough so it's not wasted, especially in developing countries. The right kind of waste can buy someone their next meal. Early on, I realized that high-value waste was not that much of a problem. The big problem were items in the low or zero value category, like chips and biscuit wrappers, which only underlines the need for an effective EPR mechanism. Now, another important aspect of EPR emphasizes the role and the responsibility placed on producers. It is brand neutral. For example, Coke and Pepsi will be keen to recycle plastics from all beverage brands and not just their own, because they will be incentivized for this type of recycling. This helps focus on actionable solutions and choosing better raw materials to aid recycling. Now, there are nationwide examples of EPR being implemented, from helping governments build infrastructure, setting up processing units, donating and procuring high-end infrastructure, creating take-back ecosystems, creating dignified jobs for the informal waste sector. There's definitely a lot taking place, but somehow it feels minimal in the glaring face of the problem. Simply put, it's just not enough. Let's quickly look at an example. A few years ago, we can all remember certain types of glass bottles being collected from our doorsteps because it had a monetary value to it, which meant a brand was paying to have it collected, as it can be 100% recycled. Now, unlike most material not downcycled or repurposed, but actually recycled. Now, monetary value equals attention from the informal waste sector immediately. This value is also higher if the brand actively supports collection, which is why imported glass bottles are discarded, because there's no liability to manage this waste. This, along with no brand support, is pretty much why you have a bunch of bottles lying around at home. Effective EPR can and should include more kinds of post-consumer waste, not just electronics and plastics. So look at your own self. Around you, your homes and offices. Products that you use today will be waste trying to find an end destination tomorrow. Since EPR currently covers all products that have plastic in it or in its packaging, we should be seeing take-back programs by all our favorite brands. It really should be all around us. Now, maybe it's the loophole where plastic is disguised, doesn't make up enough of the product to be penalized or even noticed, lack of enforcement, or pure confusion on how to actually execute these EPR programs on ground. To accept that they just don't care while we make them richer is a heartbreaking scenario. As always, I choose to focus on the bright side and what I had control over, which brings me to why I started this journey. Now, back in 2017, I started source segregating. Thinking I was being very responsible, I called the local waste picker to collect the dry waste. When he came, he further started segregating in front of me, and I asked him why. It seemed so obvious if I had just thought about it. The smaller pile was to sell, and the bigger pile was to throw in the common dustbin. This was disheartening to know, but I was eager to learn more. I went on a wild goose chase, trying to understand the pain points of urban recycling and what actually goes to the dump yard. But all I seemed to find was that there wasn't enough data to make informed decisions. I had to actually start collecting waste and interacting with the systems that we had to be able to make sense of it all. One thing led to another, and it's safe to say that EPR was the light at the end of that tunnel. Before that, it was an overwhelming few years trying to arrive at a solution that can only attempt to match the speed of the problem. Now, spending money on the issue is also much needed and is another reason why EPR is so critical. By way of infrastructure and capacity building, data collection, funded research and holistic development, knowledge transfer ecosystems, tech-supported recycling centers, and nationwide take-back schemes can take us all a long way in the right direction. I have personally worked with brands on their EPR strategies through my venture Wasted 360 Solutions and seen several other social ventures and NGOs scale their on-ground impact with brand support. Now, EPR can be the coming together of policy makers, governing bodies, informal and formal waste sector, brands, and citizens, which can make all that difference. Now, it's not about letting anyone off the hook. We refuse and reduce, but if we want to be conscious, we go that extra mile to make sure what we use today has an end destination that is not a dump yard. So how do you and I ensure EPR? Firstly, striving to be conscious consumers that aim to be part of tangible solutions, which is personally how I choose to look at EPR. Secondly, the fact that there's a working model should compel more of us to scope out EPR programs available to us. Most importantly, keep source segregating. When you segregate your waste, it means lesser pressure on the infrastructure that is meant to make EPR work. So keep source segregating and don't stop. Now, if nothing else, we have the power of choice. Pick brands that conform to EPR norms. Write to your favorite brands demanding change. Spread information with your friends, families, and communities, and gather more voices to spread the word. Now, all these small and big actions can have a ripple effect on positive climate action. This coming together of everyone can lead us to that change that we so urgently need. Thank you.
Thank you.